Hello and welcome back to another Warlords of Draenor video. So I'm sure that a lot of you are wondering how this expansion is going to fare for your guild, and then of course I'm also sure that many of you are maybe looking to get into guilds and you'd like to know how this expansion will support guild play. Well, the good news is that there's actually a really big improvement from how things were, mainly back in Mists of Pandaria. So in this video I'm just going to run down the main reasons why I think Warlords of Draenor is going to be a fantastic expansion for people who enjoy playing WoW with their guild. Okay, so first of all on the list we have got the lovely old topic of heroic dungeons and the sort of everlasting question of how hard should they be. Well, I think the good news is that the heroic dungeons in Warlords of Draenor are far harder than the Mists of Pandaria ones. Perhaps they're certainly not as challenging as the initial Cataclysm stuff, but they still do require you to have your head screwed on, which personally I think is a pretty good thing. Now, you can just do these using the LFD tool, provided you have actually completed the new version of the Proving Grounds at a silver medal, but from beta experience I can tell you that things will be a little bit shaky in pickup groups. Generally, it does seem like most of the groups that I'm in actually lose a few players along the way, and it's a little bit rough. Now, of course, you will actually lose some more players on the beta, since people don't really care about the reward at the end of the day, but these are losses that are due to wipes, so the point does stand. The mechanics of these fights are designed to require a decent bit of both knowledge and teamwork on an individual level and then of course on the level of the whole team. And this really does result in fun fights that, when executed well, actually do feel really just rewarding to defeat. They feel good. Now, I'd say that despite this silver rating requirement thingy, the most efficient way to do these dungeons will be with your guild. So the thing going on with heroic dungeons in terms of gear is that they reward item level 630 gear. Now this is 10 item levels less than the starter LFR gear from Highmall. However, this heroic dungeon gear can get a Warforged proc, meaning that it will be item level 638. Now in addition to this, the heroic dungeons will be open from day 1, whereas LFR will only be open after a few weeks pass. This is a really strong incentive to dive straight into heroic dungeons, and at the very start of the expansion, the safest way to do any content is with your guild. And with these harder heroics, absolutely you will want to be running them with your guild. Really, I think this harkens back to the initial days of Cataclysm, where many players were in guilds and they were just having an absolute blast. You know, I mean, hell, back then the dungeons sometimes just felt like miniature 5-player raids. It was really awesome. So that was really cool stuff. And while the WoD heroics are a tad easier, well, don't worry, the next point in this list will actually solve that problem. So to round it up, essentially, heroic dungeons have got a decent difficulty level, which will actually incentivize doing them in a guild. They've also got great rewards that are available from day 1, so honestly, there is just no reason not to get your guild together and just split off into sub-teams and wreck your way through this. I think a lot of people are going to really have good fun doing it. Alright then, so let's finish off the dungeon side of this video by talking about the challenge modes. First of all, as far as difficulty is concerned, it's kind of hard to tell whether the Warlords of Draenor ones are going to be harder than the Mists of Pandaria ones, but I'd say that at launch, they will be pretty darn hard. It's not like we're going to be decked out with fancy effects, trinkets, and extra sockets and the like, so these will be decently challenging at the very start of the expansion. And certainly what I do know from the beta is that these are pretty tricky and they absolutely do require people to know their stuff. During the Mists of Pandaria launch, the only incentive to run challenge modes was Valor points. Now of course that was a pretty fast way of getting VP, but it didn't sound like the participation rates were particularly high. Now that Valor points have been removed from the game though, Blizzard have come up with a more interesting reward. Every day you will get a quest, and completing that quest will give you a chance of getting a item level 640 bit of gear. Now do bear in mind that 640 is Highmall LFR quality, but unlike Highmall LFR, challenge modes will be available from day 1. Really, by the time that people have got access to Highmall LFR, you will be in full-on challenge mode gear, already just wrecking your way through the Warlords of Draenor raids. It should be pretty good. Basically, this just means that gearing up via heroics and then jumping into challenge modes at item level 630 is going to be the most optimal way of gearing in Warlords of Draenor. And I'm just really happy that this strong, guild-friendly content is going to be the best way to do things. Because guild play is generally the best kind of thing you can get in WoW. The game is an MMO, many of its systems are designed around teamwork, so it makes sense that that kind of play is being encouraged. Now, the fantastic thing about this is that it provides the Cataclysm Heroic brand of guild play that many of us have wanted. Certainly, I had a lot of fun doing Mists of Pandaria challenge modes with my guild recently, so I'm really looking forward to just splitting off with people, forming up groups, and tackling this content, hopefully during the very first week of the expansion, because I just can't wait to get, tore through the leveling and right into the end game, because there's some really good stuff, in terms of the raids and all that. Now, of course, the added difficulty doesn't mean much if the base mechanics of these fights are dull. Now, the good news is that the fights in Warlords of Draenor are actually really quite rich as far as the mechanics go. Certainly, I have found them to be far more engaging than the Mists of Pandaria dungeons. And really, they've just done a fantastic job of making excellent dungeon encounters pretty much across the board, and this should pair up very well with the increased challenge mode difficulty. Another important point to make is that the gear reward is for the completion of the dungeon, not for the time that you get. This is pretty great, as actually a lot of people were sort of put off by the whole competitive element and the whole time trial thing that was going on with the MOP challenge modes. So really, it's essentially just the mythic dungeon difficulty that many people have asked for, with an optional time trial mode if you want to get some vanity items. Overall, I just think this is going to suit guilds really, really well. Another pretty cool thing in Warlords of Draenor is the expansion of the flexible raid system into other difficulty levels. Now, previously in Mists of Pandaria, we had flexible difficulty, normal, and then heroic. Now in Warlords of Draenor, we have got normal, heroic, and mythic. Difficulty level wise, flex is the same as the new normal is the same as the new heroic, and heroic is the same as the new mythic. They're basically just shifting the name so that normal is the equivalent of flex, because they realized that most people were doing flex raids. Therefore, it makes the most sense that flexible is called normal, because, hey, normal is probably what the most people do. So the big difference, though, is that normal and heroic are actually going to scale from 10 to 30 players. Now, mythic will be 20 players only. However, that isn't really related to the main point that I'm trying to make here, and I will cover it in a bit. First of all, though, a little bit of background. I raid in a guild that, in Mists of Pandaria, did normal modes with the odd dabble into heroics. Now, this means that in Warlords of Draenor, we will be mainly involved in heroic raids, as they are the equivalent difficulty of Mists of Pandaria normals. Now, we also had a bit of an annoying issue, really, when it came to signups. Generally, there were 11 to 13 players. This was sort of annoying because every night some people would have to go on the bench, and that's not fun. I don't think anyone enjoys being on the bench. I don't think any raid leaders or just raid members enjoy people being on the bench. It's just not a good thing. With this flexible model being applied to all non-mythic difficulty levels, it now means that you can bring anyone who turns up, provided of course that you don't mess up your raid's composition. But if you've got, say, 13 or 14 players, chances are you'll be able to mix up the healers and do all that, so you've got a decent group. Now, this really is quite brilliant. First of all, it's of course going to lead to less disappointment, which I think is a pretty cool thing. Secondly, though, it's going to allow for guilds to freely grow. Say freely grow as much as they want to. Obviously, if a guild wants to maintain a smaller culture, they can do that. But if they want to grow from a 10-player guild into something larger, it's very easy to do. So say that your 10-player raid has got a really solid roster. Well, you're not really going to want to bring on new people, unless you're going up to 25, as there'd be no place for them. Well, that's actually a limiting factor that's now gone. You can bring on as many people as you want, at whatever speed that you want, and you're not really going to be hurting your raid, because it'll be flexible. If 16 people turn up for your heroic raid, well, the good news is you can bring all 16 of them. Basically, that limiting factor for guild growth is now gone, and I think that's a pretty great thing. Now, of course, there is a little bit of a downside here, and that is that guilds that rated 10 or 25 heroic in Mists of Pandaria will have to resize in order to fit the new 20-player mythic difficulty in Warlords of Draenor. This does have its pros and cons, but hopefully the affected guilds will have been able to sort out some sort of working roster, as they have known about the change for a year, so there has been time to work all that stuff out. There are also many guilds who, like us, did 10 normal and a little bit of 10 heroic. This is no longer going to be possible, which is quite the pity, and it is one thing that I am really pretty disappointed about. Though overall, I think there are more pros than cons to this new raid system, and hopefully the flexible system will allow groups like mine to grow into 20-player Mythic at a very organic and easy manner if they so choose. So overall, there's a bit more freedom going on, and I think it's just going to be overall good for the health of guilds. Another nice thing for guilds is that the max level outdoor content is sort of optimized in a few ways for group play. Now, while I'm not the biggest fan of this content, there are plenty of group-friendly elements, which of course maps on pretty well to guilds. First of all, there is this system where you can get things called Apex's crystals. These are mainly a reward from a daily group quest, and these crystals can be used to buy max level gear that is decently useful. So every day you will get a choice between 2 different daily quests, a little bit like what was going on in the Isle of Thunder where you could choose between the PvE and PvP quest. Well, this time there's a whole big pool of quests, and sometimes one of these quests will be tagged as being a group quest, and it will require killing mobs that are designed for multiple players to fight. These quests will reward you with an extra 200 Apex's crystals in comparison to the solo ones, and also the mobs in those areas will drop more crystals. Also, of course, those areas will have harder rare mobs with the difficulty level and reward that is designed for groups. Now, this essentially all means that you're going to get a decent reward for doing these group things with, well, with a group. These missions do reward better, so that is totally going to sort of facilitate, group play and all that stuff, which is pretty cool for guilds. Now, since most people will be hanging out in their garrisons, and these quests come from your garrison, it will actually be really easy to get groups together because the chances are that you'll be starting off from the same place in the world. Hell, you could even enter your friend's garrison and, if they had a mage tower, teleport right to the zone where the quest is. That's another pretty cool thing about the garrison system. Now, also, the Warlords of Draenor reputations do involve a lot of mob grinding, actually, with there being harder elite mobs and rares that give even more rep. So basically like Xiaohao. This stuff is best done with other people, so once again, it all works out pretty well for guilds. Now, while this stuff could of course just be done with, randos from the group finder, I think that this is the kind of stuff that you will want to do with your guild if you have the chance. I mean, hell, chances are you'll be playing with your guild a lot doing the 5-player content anyway, so it just makes sense that you'll probably get together some evening, knock out one of these daily quests, the group variants with the higher reward, and then run off and just knock out a few dungeons. Overall, it sounds like this is just going to keep guilds playing together, which is good for player retention, and of course, the more social links that people form within the game, the more likely they are to stay in the game, and of course that leads to healthier guilds, and, overall, it's just pretty good stuff. So I've covered a lot of PvE so far, and of course it's time to just mention one point about PvP. Now, first of all, I'm not a major PvPer, I do dabble from time to time, and my guild is not a PvP guild, but I think there's some content that's actually going to be pretty good for the PvP crowd. First of all, Ashran really does suit guild groups, and quite well. Despite the fact the main Ashran lane gameplay is rather zergy, many of the side objectives in Ashran are actually sized to feel something similar to a 5 versus 5 or 10 versus 10 battle. This means that guild groups are actually going to find great success when trying to capture these in Ashran. In addition to this, Ashran has also got areas with some elite mobs and then a few mini-bosses, so again, this stuff is just well suited to guild groups. Really, I could foresee guilds, PvP guilds, getting together and just saying, right, we're going to do an hour of Ashran, split off into maybe, I don't know, a raid group, and just have group 1 and 2 go do X, group 3 and 4 go do Y, and overall, I think that could be pretty fun. With World PvP being dead, I don't really think there was much of a bespoke thing for PvP guilds to do that wasn't rated battlegrounds or arenas. Hopefully, Ashran will add an additional thing for these guilds to do. And I guess that ideally, there could be a decent amount of rivalry going on Ashran, especially on the PvP servers, because after all, you're going to be fighting the same enemy guilds for months and months on end. So hopefully there will be some sort of fun rivalry going on. Then I also think that the skirmish mode that's being introduced in Warlords of Draenor, despite being a match-made version of arenas, is actually going to, in a way, help out guilds. It really does lower the barrier to entry as far as arena-style gameplay goes, and I think this is going to provide a great place for people to just get some of the basics down. Sure, there is no replacement for having a good practice partner and running into arenas, but still, at least getting some of these skirmishes in is going to help people out, and really, it's a more approachable way to the traditional, grouping up with somebody and sort of formally doing arenas. and that approachability should hopefully get more people into PvP, which can only be a good thing because, of course, some of those people are going to be really skilled and they're going to join the PvP guilds, and overall, hopefully the health of the scene will improve just a little bit. Alright then, so the next 2 points in this list are a little bit smaller. There's quick things that I want to mention at the end of the video. So first of all, guild levels are gone, but do not worry, many of the passive bonuses and things that you actually cared about have either been baked into the game or have been taken account of. The system, I think, with guild levels was a bit of a drag, and according to Blizzard, it provided an additional barrier to making a new guild actually be successful, because really, who would choose a level 3 guild over a level 25 guild that came with all the bells and whistles and cool things? Unless it was a real-life friends guild, I don't think it was really that feasible starting off a new guild. So yeah, the removal of guild levels should certainly help out. Also, the removal of that perk, which involved getting, some money from people's loot drops and all that stuff. With that being gone, actually, it should mean that you get a lot less in the way of annoying spam when you're trying to level up characters, because a lot of people would just make social leveling guilds so they could basically reap the monetary rewards as GM. So it's nice that's been gone. Oh, and the lost revenue from that is being compensated for by the weekly guild challenges and various things like that. Just overall, I think that being able to make a new guild and have less barriers to getting new people is a good thing, and it should hopefully mean that players who really feel like being a GM is the thing for them can give that a good, viable shot. And finally, the in-game group finder has actually got a pretty good benefit for guilds. Now, if you're struggling to get attendance on any night for whatever content you want to do, well, I'd imagine that if you post that you've got a guild group and you put reasonable requirements up, then you'll get plenty of applicants with this new group finder system. I mean, hell, I'm sure that eventually you might even find a few people who are a good fit for the guild on a permanent basis. So I'd say that while this does help pugging, it will also help guilds, because there are many instances in which a guild will want to pug the 1 or 2 last people that they need. I know that certainly from a raiding perspective, being limited to just trade chat is a bit of a pity, and things like OQ, while they are great, don't have a massive uptake with the player base. Certainly in comparison to something that's baked into the UI that all 7.4 million people get, well, there's just no competition. The in-game thing has got a far greater reach, and that should just mean that there's going to be less failed guild nights because there weren't enough people. Alright then, so there you have it. They are my 7 reasons why I think guild play is going to be a lot better in Warlords of Draenor. Honestly, I can't see many negatives coming in this expansion, other than maybe some of those fun hijinks with the 20-player mythic thing, just kind of upsetting 1 or 2 guilds, which is a bit of a pity, yeah, and it will suck for my guild, but I'm sure we'll get around it. Other than that, though, there's a lot of great stuff going on. I think dungeons are going to be an absolute blast, certainly from the beta. It would seem like they're really fun, and I don't think Blizzard plan on nerfing them into the ground instantly, so I'd say that overall, stuff is actually looking pretty bright in this expansion. So that's really it for the video. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see you next time.